Hello, Bloomington. I'm Mayor Tim Busse, and this is the Council Minute for the first week of February. It's hard to believe it's February already, and it's hard to believe that we're fast approaching the one-year mark of living in a COVID-19 world. I know everybody watching this has been affected in some way. As I said Monday night, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So please keep doing the little things to keep yourself and the people you care about safe. I want to see all of us make it to the other side of this, so please, please be safe. Just as all of our lives have been affected, I'm sure that you know that the pandemic has presented many challenges to the city of Bloomington. We've had to manage budget and financial pressures. We've had to make sure that our public safety and public health staff can operate safely and that they have the resources they need. We've had to figure out how to equip and support many of our employees who are now working at home, and we've had to rethink how we provide customer service in many of our operations. We've responded to needs in our community by committing federal relief funds to VEAP for food and rent assistance, by partnering with the school district to help deliver meals, and by directing $1 million of critical financial assistance to Bloomington small businesses devastated by this pandemic. And we've been working on the issue of homelessness and how we partner with those providing shelter to people experiencing homelessness. This week, the City Council acted on a resolution to allow for temporary pandemic housing under very tightly controlled conditions. The Temporary Pandemic Response Housing Permit is a short-term remedy designed to alleviate the impacts of COVID-19 and respond to the governor's executive orders related to the housing of unsheltered persons. As I'm sure you know, over the past year, several Bloomington hotels entered into contracts with Hennepin County and with other social service organizations to provide shelter for homeless and displaced persons. Not surprisingly, social distancing requirements to keep people safe in a pandemic simply don't work in a traditional shelter system. Service providers were looking for more options to house people safely, and the hotels were looking for ways to find some revenue when the hotel economy collapsed. Also not surprisingly, the hotels were not prepared to serve as homeless shelters. Many of the people who experience homelessness have additional challenges, such as mental health issues or chemical dependencies, and it is essential for services to be available. And in too many situations in Bloomington hotels, that wasn't happening. That led to a significant increase in calls for service to Bloomington Police, Bloomington Fire, to our code enforcement officials, and to many others. Over the last few months, our staff has worked very closely with the property owners and managers, with Hennepin County, and the social service agencies to make these locations safer, to make our adjacent neighborhoods and commercial areas safer, to get services to the people who need them, and to reduce the numbers of calls for service to Bloomington Police. This work has greatly reduced the negative impact of the mismanaged shelter operations we've seen. One issue that we needed to address is that many of the properties providing shelter were in violation of the city's zoning code, which limits hotel stays to less than 30 days. Our staff worked with the Planning Commission to look at options to ensure that we were responsibly administering our city code while still working through this emergency situation to keep people safe and to anticipate that other hotels may be looking to enter into contracts with these agencies. So, the resolution the City Council approved allows a property to get a temporary pandemic housing permit so long as the declaration of emergency and the governor's executive order are in place. To get this permit, an applicant must submit a detailed security plan that has to be approved by the chief of police. They're also required to submit a health and safety plan that must be approved by the fire marshal. There has to be a management and operations plan that addresses things like on-site staffing, record-keeping protocols, occupancy data, a code of conduct with a policy on drug and alcohol use, and protocols for communications with the city, emergency response, and property maintenance. A very important piece of this management and operations plan is the pandemic plan for reducing the spread of disease within the facility and following governmental health guidance. Finally, there also has to be a transition plan that identifies next steps to connect occupants to stable housing and other support services so there is a thoughtful approach to how people move out when that time eventually comes. The transition plan will also outline the plan and the timeline for returning the hotels to its intended and licensed use. I want to thank our staff for their diligence in making sure that the health and safety of our community were paramount considerations as they work through this issue. Providing safe shelter options for those living with housing insecurity and ensuring a safe community for our residents and businesses, these are not mutually exclusive goals. As with everything during this pandemic, it took us a bit of time to get the response right and to figure out who we needed to partner with to be successful. But I believe we've done that. And the action taken by the Council this week is another step to making sure that public safety can be maintained. For the past couple of years, a number of Council members have shared their concerns about the inequities experienced by workers who do not have a right to take time off from their jobs when their personal or family circumstances require it. In this time of pandemic, that concern has only been heightened as we've seen disparities in how the virus has affected people working in service industries that often don't have paid time off benefits. Last year, the City Council directed staff to research something called Earned Sick and Safe Leave, and to return to the Council with an outline for how the City of Bloomington might consider such a policy for our community. An Earned Sick and Safe Leave ordinance would require employers operating in Bloomington to provide some amount of paid sick and safe leave to employees. In Minnesota, 3 of the other largest cities, Duluth, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, they've already adopted an ordinance like this. This week, our staff provided a side-by-side comparison of the ordinances in each of these 3 cities with details like the amount of leave that employees can earn, which employers the ordinance applies to, and the process the cities used to develop their ordinance. The staff also laid out a couple of different process options for the Council to consider. One of the key considerations is who to include as we study this issue and to what extent. The timeline, the level of community engagement, and the kinds of information that will be needed are also really important to define at the outset of this process. After a very good Council discussion, the Council was clear that we wanted to see a working group or task force process that will include interested stakeholders, represented employees and employers in Bloomington. Staff will come back to the City Council in late March with a project scope that will have much greater clarity about the charge that will be given to the working group. Looking back at how successful the Community Budget Advisory Committee process was last year, one of the keys to that success was having very clear direction from the Council to the committee on what their purpose was and what was expected of them. The preliminary timeline laid out by staff would have the working group studying the issue through the summer and fall with a recommendation to the City Council toward the end of the year. But before we get there, we'll be reviewing the project scoping document on March 22nd to make sure that the Council and the staff are working with the same expectations and understandings of our goal. Around this time each year, the city's advisory boards and commissions present their annual work plans to the City Council. This week, we heard from the Sustainability Commission, whose chair laid out another ambitious and thoughtful work plan to advance the city's commitment to have a more sustainable environment, to think and behave more sustainably in our operations and our policies, and to ensure the quality of life for both current Bloomington residents and for future generations. Sustainability was one of the pillars of the strategic plan adopted by the City Council in 2016. We established the Sustainability Commission in 2017 as one of the key actions implementing our strategic plan. Since that time, the Commission has been steadily moving ahead on issues that will make a difference well into the future. For 2021, the Commission will focus their work on these 7 areas: ecological land stewardship, energy with a special emphasis on natural gas and electricity, environmental justice, solid waste, transportation, water, and multiple areas of sustainability. Their efforts this year will include the continuation of work on Bloomington's Energy Action Plan, which was adopted in 2018 and studies green building standards with an eye toward recommendations for the City Council to consider later this year. They'll be advising the Council as we consider how best to move forward on organics recycling and citywide curbside cleanup. And they'll be promoting programs and strategies to increase energy efficiency in residential homes and commercial buildings. Those are just some of the initiatives they'll be taking on. Folks, we have a lot of work to do as we strive toward the city's carbon reduction goal of 75% and our energy goal to reduce citywide electricity-related greenhouse gas emissions by 95%, both by the year 2035. I want to offer my thanks to the Sustainability Commission. They are doing great work on behalf of all of us to ensure a better Bloomington. You can learn about their work here on the city's website. Well, that's a wrap on this week's Council Minute. I hope to see you again next week. Until then, stay safe, Bloomington.